Thanks. I'm gonna be the shortest one up here. That was actually pretty good. I didn't even mean that. All right, first of all, I was robbed. I was robbed on that Twitter award. I should have won that because in April, late April of 2020, Georgia slightly reopened, and you could get a haircut, and you could go to a few restaurants in Georgia. So instantly, Jenna and I went to Georgia. We're going to Georgia. You couldn't go to a restaurant in Florida. Free state of Florida, no restaurant. We drove up to Georgia. And for lunch one day, I ate a sandwich in a restaurant. I took a picture of the sandwich and I tweeted it. That sandwich got thousands and thousands of likes, doggone it. And I guess those thousands of likes will have to fill the void left by my not receiving the award. Well, the only thing I want to say up here, because I wasn't actually on the slate, but then I said, let me get up there, is I think when you have a movement like this, where we are outnumbered, I mean, you know, this is a nice big crowd. You go out to the United States, we're way outnumbered. The way we judge people is according to whether you're a doer or a talker. And a lot of the people who don't like us, they're great talkers. What the hell have any of them done, most of these people, right? What have they done? And I look to this room and these people whom I love dearly, and I think, my gosh, these are the biggest doers I've ever met in my life. First of all, Dan makes the most unbelievable videos imaginable. If some of you remember that in January, I took my time for a month teasing an announcement I was going to make on February 1st, and I kept releasing videos. Dan did that to you. Dan tortured you with those videos. But I think of somebody who would love to be here with us but was not able to be, a fellow traveler, a guy we all know and love, Eric July. So Eric has a band called Backwards, which he's going to start taking back onto the road with new material soon. They released their first album, hits number 5 on the Billboard Hard Rock chart. And then, he's got a successful podcast, he's got a gig on The Blaze, and I asked him, how often do you convert people on, let's say, the conservative side over to libertarian? He says, all the time. All the time. This is always happening. The guy is a dynamo. And then on top of that, he's a comic book expert. He doesn't like what he's been seeing coming out of the comic book world. So the guy is creating his own comic book company. So he doesn't solve his problem by going on Twitter and saying, Marvel and DC, blah, 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 blah. Okay, you can do that a few times. But now he takes matters into his own hands. He's going to create his own thing. That's what we are. We're the doers. We're the doers here. Maj here, look at what he's done with Black Guns Matter, with conflict resolution and training in firearms and alerting people about U.S. gun laws. Look at, he's a doer. He's a doer. The person we have running for chair is such a ridiculously over-the-top, insane doer that I feel like half the time I'm begging her to get some sleep. I stay in fairly regular contact with Angela McArdle, and she works all the time. In fact, her boyfriend tells me that when you're with Angela, the only way you can tell it's the weekend is by looking at the calendar. Non-stop, she is so devoted to this. And after all her work at her day job, and after all the work she does for the Libertarian Party in Los Angeles County and in California, she's also, in her so-called spare time, doing pro bono legal work for businesses who were hurt by lockdowns, or for friends in need, or making videos and content. And for a long time, she did this also while cursed with some very challenging health issues that she's gradually been able to overcome. And she did all this without complaining and with a smile on her face. That's hard to do. And we got her on our side. our MC over here, Scott Horton. Scott Horton's a doer. Did you know Scott Horton used to be a cab driver? And you'd ride around with him and he would be talking to you nonstop. It would be like the opposite of cash cab. You got to pay to get the hell out of it. When I had my 2000th episode event last year, Scott was there and he was kind of thinking to himself, I've done almost 6,000 interviews. What is a 2,000 episode event? What the heck is this? But this is a guy who, he got to where he is now, having knowledge of everything around the world simultaneously. He did that how? By just sheer hard work, by pushing himself, because he believes in this, because he hates injustice, because he hates human suffering, and he devotes himself to the pursuit of knowledge so that we can fight it more effectively. He's a doer. And so, yeah, you'll find people who don't like Scott Horton. I don't know who they are, but you'll find them. You'll find people who don't like Maj. You'll find people who don't like Eric. You'll find people who don't like Angela. How many things have those people done? Nothing. Never. Never anything. That's the message. We're doers. That's why we're winning. It's easy to go on Twitter and slander people. It's hard to do work. It takes effort and it takes brains, which is why we're the ones doing it. But there's one more person I want to mention. Now, obviously, I could mention so many people here. And Dr. Paul, I have given so many speeches about you and your heroism, but I'm going to leave that to Dave tonight. I'm thinking, in this case, of somebody, it's almost a cliche now for me to mention this name. But we have to say something tonight about the unbelievable vision of the great Michael Heiss. He was sitting at my table. I thought he was over here. All right, good to see you. Good to see you, Mike. I mean, the things they have called this guy. I don't even recognize him in the things they say about him.
Hate watch.
That's right. This is one of the kindest, sweetest, most generous people I've ever met, and a brilliant strategist, extremely self-sacrificing. He had this vision, and it must be surreal for him to be standing in this room looking at all of you and all of us saying, no more of this party being a joke. We're going to take on the real issues, not just civil asset forfeiture. Yeah, I know, I'm more against that probably than anybody, okay? Like, I'm against that too. But, you know, in the middle of 2020, it's pretty tone deaf to be talking about that. And to let the lockdowns and all the insanity just go uncommented on? Come on. Get bent. So I just want to say a thank you to those people and to all the others here I could mention for being doers, for not being losers who just tear other people down, but who build things up. That's how you have victory. You build something. And I want to get out of here by I'm usurping Scott's role, but he knew this in advance. I want to introduce our penultimate, that is to say, next to last speaker. And that is a guy we all know who it's going to be, okay? We all know it's going to be. Hold your applause. We all know who the second to last person here is. But I want to say that it has been an absolute pleasure to watch the full emergence of this man, and of course I mean Dave Smith. Because back in 2017, Dave Smith was a special guest aboard, may it rest in peace, the Contra Cruise, the old cruise I was the host. And the thing is, I went back and looked at some old video footage we have from it. And I remember asking people in the room, hey, so how many people listened to Part of the Problem? And it got a smattering of applause. How many people in this room listened to Part of the Problem? Now that's been awesome to see. And Dave's done it so brilliantly. He's taken every opportunity that's been given to him to have debates, to get his profile increased, to get himself out there, to be on big shows, and he has made us proud every single time. He is such an effective communicator. I am convinced he's the best libertarian communicator we have today. I am convinced of that. And back years ago when he released his first comedy special, which we trust will be followed by a second comedy special, it spent 3 weeks at #1 on iTunes. Imagine if he released another one now that everybody knows who the hell he is. Imagine how that would be. Ladies and gentlemen, I could not possibly be more delighted to introduce to you my good friend, Dave Smith.
What an incredible weekend. Look, how else can you say it than what we're doing this weekend? It's this simple. The Ron Paul revolution is back. It's back, and it's in the Libertarian Party this time. And it's pretty incredible for me to hear Tom Wood say these nice things about me. Tom has been a hero of mine for years, and every time he says this, I'm going to still say I think Tom Woods is the best communicator we have. So all of that credit goes back to Tom. Look, I've been having an incredible time this week. I'm losing my voice a little bit because I've been talking to so many of you. So by tomorrow, it will certainly be gone. But it's been amazing going around the country to all the state LP conventions and coming out here. So I just want to say first, a huge thank you to the best person that I know, who is my wife, who is at home with our 2 little kids, so I can come out and do all this. So really, all the credit goes to her. You guys doing the video, if you could clip that and email it to her, that would really win me some points when I go back home. That would be very nice. All right, so let me talk quickly about what it is that we're doing here, okay, and why I think this is so important. So, what's going on in the country? What are the problems that we're facing? And as you guys in this room know, it's a lot more than the craziness that's been going on over the last 2 years. It's really like the craziness that's been going on over the last 120 years that we're dealing with, okay? That's culminated in the craziness of the last 2 years. So what's the big problem in America? Well, let's think about it. Okay, #1, progressives, okay? The main problem here is progressives, starting with the original progressive era, which gave us the income tax and the Federal Reserve and the military-industrial complex, starting with the First World War, the FBI, the 3-letter agencies, and the New Deal. They gave us the warfare state and the welfare state and the central bank. But it's not completely hopeless, because to fight the progressives, we have the conservatives. And the conservatives only have one little problem, which is that they're a bunch of progressives. So, if you can get past that, they're pretty good. So the conservatives in America all endorse the central bank and the warfare state and the welfare state and everything that was wrong with the original progressive era. Conservatives, at their best, are fighting for what progressives believed in 7 years ago. That's when they're at their absolute best. Conservatives are saying like, hey, let's go back to Barack Obama. They're like progressives, let's say, I just came up with this, driving the speed limit, okay? And it's right off the top of my head. But this is always, without a doubt, it fails. Ask anyone in the conservative movement today about Obamacare, and they'll start talking to you about how we have to, cover pre-existing conditions. Like, they can't even go back beyond just the most recent, and this is why they lose every single battle. What are conservatives doing even when they're fighting kind of the right battle? Like, so we have the indoctrination in public schools, like the latest iteration of it, which I will admit is particularly troubling. But conservatives will stand up and they will say, no, sexual propagandizing of my child until the 4th grade. We're taking a stand here, all right? But why is it that they can never actually win? Because look at from the other flip side, what are they conceding? They're conceding that you can do it from 4th grade through 12th grade, and then through the universities as well. So conservatives never win because they're never attacking the root of the problem. What we stand for is attacking the root of the problem. We stand for repealing the entire progressive era. That's what our movement is about. Every inch of it. Now, we have an incredible opportunity in front of us right now. Something we've never had before. We have, of course, this weekend, what we're doing, and this is just the truth of the matter, right? I don't think anyone could really argue it at this point after today. If everybody who showed up today shows up tomorrow, and I know you're all going to, if we all come in tomorrow, then it is a fact that Ron Paul libertarians have completely taken over the Libertarian Party. What does that mean exactly? Well, there are essentially two big, powerful parties in America, and then there is a third option, which bears the name Libertarian. And for a very long time, many libertarians have not been happy with how this party represented our views, to the point that the majority of libertarians aren't even members of the party, because they would rather try to fight for liberty in some other venue, and honestly, with what the party's been for years, who can blame them? But that's all changing now. And one of the things that really gives us this opportunity, right, and it's something that's kind of, it's tragic in a way, but it's maybe just something about the nature of man, but when things are at their worst, we kind of have our best opportunity. There's a reason, there's several reasons, but one of the reasons why Dr. Paul's message resonated so much in 2008 was because the wars were a disaster. I don't know if people remember how bloody the war in Iraq was in 2005, 2006. It was really 2004, 2005, 2006. So the war was such a disaster. And then the economy crashed. And Dr. Paul was the one who was speaking about those issues and explaining to the American people what caused them. And then also he had a record of having been consistent on these issues over a span of decades. So he had real credibility to do that. Well, right now, we're in another situation like that, where you have these two major issues, which is the COVID regime of the last 2 years has been proven to have been wrong about everything. It's at this point, it's basically settled science that the lockdowns did nothing to mitigate the virus. And that, in fact, all they did was destroy the lives of tens of millions of Americans. And the vaccine mandates and the mask mandates and all of it, they did nothing. All they did was ruin people's lives. And so now we have that going for us. We're not clapping that people's lives have been ruined, but it's just that does lead to an opportunity for the people who have been consistent about this. And while we were critical of the people in the Libertarian Party who weren't speaking out about this, all of the good libertarian leaders, including, of course, first and foremost, Dr. Ron Paul, was great on COVID from day one. From day one, he was so good. Watching the Liberty Report with Daniel McAdams and Ron Paul, from the first week of COVID, they were completely right about everything. Of course, Tom Woods was the greatest champion of challenging the lockdowns and taking on all of the arguments. Eric July and Maj Touré and all of our leaders were great on this from the very beginning. And so now we have credibility on that. Now, the other major crisis that's really facing the country right now is inflation. And everybody is feeling it now. And basically, no one ever talks about inflation until it gets to this level, except us. We talk about it all the time. And also, we happen to have the advantage of being the only people who even know what it is. And by the way, I'm not like, I don't say this to be like, I'm not looking down at regular people who don't know what inflation is. There's lots of things that I don't know. I am a professional stand-up comedian. I don't really know what a microphone is. Like, I don't know what's inside of it. Someone else does. Before, we were getting a lot of feedback on the microphone, and someone went to me, they go, do you think the gain's too high? And I was like, I don't know what gain is. I have no idea. I'm just saying, there's lots of things that I don't know too. But regular people don't know about this the way we do. See, most people think that inflation means prices of things are going up. But that's not what inflation is. Inflation is the creation of money. It's more money and credit in the system. More money chasing the same amount of goods. So we're the ones who actually understand what's causing this, and no one else is talking about it. It's the Federal Reserve and fiat currency. This is our opportunity. I did not mean to steal your chant up here. I promise these people have another End the Fed chant in them when you get up here. These people, they'll chant it all night long if we want to. But this is the opportunity that we have right now. There are these crises that are facing the American people. Everybody is waking up to the reality that this system is spinning out of control. I remember back in, it was in the 2008 presidential debates, or maybe it was in the 2012 ones, I can't remember, I've seen all of them. But someone asked Dr. Paul about immigration, and they asked him at one point, they said, oh, well, would you support, building a wall? And Dr. Paul said, I don't know about that. And he said, that wall could be used to keep us in. And at the time, I think to a lot of people that seemed like, well, that's a little bit out there. I mean, the government telling you can't leave? Now, who after the last 2 years thinks that's such a crazy idea, that the government might do that? So people are more open to this message now than ever before, and we also have the opportunity with the internet and huge podcasts and huge platforms to talk to more people than we've ever been able to before. This is a big opportunity, and now we also will have the third party that bears the name Libertarian saying the things exactly the way we think they should be said, giving the real, authentic Libertarian message, the Misesian, Rothbardian, Ron Paulian message that we all love so much. That's what and I'll just add that to me, one of the central messages of the campaigns of 2008 and 2012 was the power of ideas and how much ideas matter. And I think that sometimes we can lose sight of that. And you can feel like, well, okay, even if we do convince more people of this, I mean, how does that translate? How do we actually seize power and roll back the state and all this? And I would just tell you this, right? Think about how much two things. How much the power of ideas has meant in the past. Think about someone like Thomas Paine, who wrote pamphlets. And he changed the world, okay? But ideas have changed societies for all of human history. And the other thing I would tell you is, think about how much our enemies value the power of ideas. Why is it that they launched these propaganda campaigns? Think about the propaganda behind the lockdowns and the vaccines. The biggest they made the propaganda for the war in Iraq look like nothing. I don't know, people who are my age in your late 30s, we remember that in 2002, the year-long propaganda campaign to lead us into the war in Iraq. Well, how come they didn't just invade Iraq in the Christmas of 2001? They wanted to. They had the plans drawn out since the 90s when they had invaded Iraq. But they needed a year of a campaign of propaganda in order to work up enough support so that they could get away with doing it. And you see, even through this COVID regime, once the popular support goes, the tyranny goes too. And the truth is that we've never really, outside of the Ron Paul campaigns, in modern American history, had anyone explain libertarianism to the American people in the way that it's supposed to be explained. And the result of that was enormous enthusiasm, and millions of people converted. And I'm telling you, because I'm out there in the world doing it, there are still, the vast majority of Americans have not heard this message yet. There's no reason why we can't go from having a couple million libertarians to having 20 million libertarians. We can do that. And in fact, I'll tell you, we're going to do that. And we're going to do that. So get ready. And I don't know, as Tom stole Scott's job, I'm also going to steal Scott's job and introduce our final speaker, which really, I don't know, everyone who knows me knows what an honor this is to introduce your final speaker to the night. And I don't know what else I can say, because I've basically spent the last decade of my career saying all the nice things that I could say. But I will always, for the rest of my life, be indebted to this man for introducing me to these ideas that changed my life. They're the most beautiful and noble ideas in the history of political philosophy, and he introduced them to so many of us. He really is the reason why we have all of this energy here today. Ladies and gentlemen, please clap your hands for Dr. Ron Paul.
Finish my speeches on during the campaign would be that, serious stuff we're talking about. The consequences of not having your liberty is very serious. And I said, we'll talk about that, but the most important thing is that we leave with a bit of optimism, because it's not that complicated. Freedom is not a complicated issue, and it's a wonderful issue. But the one thing is at an event like this, and I can't give you this advice because you're already doing it, because I tell the crowds, if they're enthusiastic and like this, just have fun talking about it and spreading the message. To have a lot of fun, and somebody said to me, oh yeah, they're going to be in a good mood, they might have had a little drink, and I understand that nobody drinks here. So no, it is wonderful to be here. I was thinking back, I spent what is equivalent today to nearly $2,000 to pay my lifetime membership in the Libertarian Party, because I merely gave them a gold coin. It wasn't quite $2,000, but now to go out and get an ounce of gold, you're going to pay close to $2,000 for that. But that was to make a point, because the monetary issue was an issue that I dwelled on for a long time and continue to do it, because you can bring this together. Liberty is one thing. You can talk about liberty and work for it. But most everything that's been said today has to be paid for. And they're not going to work for it and pay for it. You can't tax the people enough, and so they have to use plunder, and that is illegal taxation. But most of the things are paid for through inflation, printing money with the remaining trust in our dollar, which is dwindling every single day, and that's not going to be the worst thing to happen if we are prepared and get enough people that protect themselves and understand it, what the answer to it is. And now it looks like a couple countries, I think they used to be communists or something, China and Russia. Can you imagine them trying to work on a gold standard? And what are we doing? Printing money faster than ever, trillions and trillions of dollars. And the main thing is people actually think it's going to work, and it does temporarily. It was mentioned, I think Dave might have mentioned it, that a lot of people don't really understand exactly what inflation is. And I said that was certainly true about all the Federal Reserve Board members that I ever talked to. When you're in a congressional office, parents will bring young children in for civics lessons. Teenagers or younger. This is your congressman, and this is the way you write laws. It's all fiction, so to speak, because it doesn't happen that way. But during one of the campaigns, there was a couple coming in. There was a couple with their son, and their son was about, I think he said he was 14. And I said, "Oh, you brought your children in and meet their congressman." And they say, "No, he brought us in." And he was actually watching television and listening to one of my speeches. And we talked, and all of a sudden I paused and I said, "This is amazing. You know more about the Federal Reserve than the Federal Reserve Board themselves." That's what convinced me that the one thing you don't want is to teach monetary policy to a 45 or 50-year-old PhD in economics from a Keynesian economic system. Forget it. Or anybody that maybe understands exactly what it is, and they know how they can grab hold of that stuff first, get hold of the money. And that, of course, there are special interests, the military-industrial complex and the school system, all the way. And they have the tremendous advantage. And of course, one of the worst things that will come of the inflation that we have is the fact that it divides us. We want to bring people together, and freedom does bring people together. That's the magnificent thing about freedom, because people come together, and people who understand freedom, as long as people aren't using violence, you can be very tolerant of what they do. We certainly accept in general that we don't tell other people what their religious beliefs ought to be, and we're pretty open. And we still believe you're not supposed to steal. At least they say that, unless you're the government. And you're not allowed to counterfeit the money unless you're the government, and then you get to do that. But that's that is important. But has already been mentioned tonight about just telling the truth, and I want to dwell on that a little bit, because there are a lot of ideas. Ideas have consequences. We deal with ideas more than anybody else. But the problem, as I see it, is not that the ideas aren't available. It's a lying game. Who tells the biggest lies? Who gets away with the lying? And and that's what all politics is about. Is the misinformation and trying to demagogue the issue and bring people together for political power. The political power, though, is always so dangerous and does so much harm. And I think that the libertarian movement has to be the movement, because there's nothing left that will sort this out. And because the philosophy is not complicated. You can't use force against people. That's really complicated. You can't steal. You can't lie, cheat, or steal. But we live in a confused time, because not too long ago we had an FBI agent, the CIA chairman, and he was also the Secretary of State. And he says, he was joking, he was giving this major speech, and he says, that's what they teach us. They teach us how to lie, cheat, and steal. And we have to kill people. And he giggled about it. And he was head of the CIA, and he was Secretary of State. And of course, it wasn't like it wasn't like a slip of the tongue, He was making a joke and thought it was real funny, but it was a true statement. People who know what's going on, that's exactly the case. But because, many libertarians have been taught, and I've heard it so many times, and they'll teach their children, really think carefully. Don't call the police. That doesn't help you out that much. So somebody says, "Does that mean I should call the FBI?" You're really going to get a lot of help from those organizations. But one of the sad things happening today, because I enjoyed working with progressives, honest progressives, the ones that understand it, and they're libertarian-ish on civil liberties, and there was a time that they were pretty good anti-war, and I had some good allies on it, but that's gone. And you say, oh, that's sad. Well, it is sad because you want to build and bring coalitions together, but I was able to work with them. Matter of fact, deep down inside, I believe it's probably every bit as easy if you can find an honest person, calls himself a progressive, believes in civil liberties, is anti-war. He's a much easier convert than a warmonger conservative war. Truth is what we should seek, and this is the whole thing. It's trying to decide, what truth is, and I got to thinking about that, and for recent times, and listening to these campaigns. Does the Biden campaign tell more lies than the Republican campaigns? Well, that's up for grabs, but they're all big eyes. And but the one thing that the big lie I don't like is they pretend they really hate each other's guts, but you take the top 10 people in each political party, and they're buddies, they're drinking buddies, and they get along quite well. Do you think the Republican Party is more opposed to the Federal Reserve than the Democrats? I mean, do you think the Republicans are less likely to start a war than the Democrats? Now the Democrats are joining in on these wars. And what about just the welfare state, deficit finance? They've all been taught in the same school. And I do place a lot of emphasis on the basic education because I went through the government education, 12 years, grade school, high school, and then a college. It was a private college, but it was very, very typical. And the history, the economics, and everything was the same stuff. And then in the 60s, I started getting glimpses of what liberty meant. And I thought, wow, this is different. And then, so I started reading and studying and thinking and I've told people, and I think it's true, I said, it probably took me 10 years to unlearn all the bad stuff they pumped into my brain for the first 20 years. One person that helped me very much in trying to develop the right tone for persuasion, and that was Leonard Reed with the Foundation of Economic Action. Because he said tone was very important, and that persuasion is important, and you can't get them by knocking heads together. That won't work. And in a way, we have to be salesmen. If you're in a business and your job is selling stuff, you want to advertise, you want your product to be good, and you do all the sales pitches. But I don't think we think that through on how to present this. And I don't think we have overcome conservatives who profess and are good sometimes on some of the welfare spending. I don't think we do a good job in showing a little bit of empathy. You say, well, you don't have to, and you don't. A libertarian can just march on their way. But I tell you what, the world is better off, and if you want to spread a message, you have to look like you care about people. And the truth, the majority of people do care, but they get confused with all this stuff that's put into their brain, mixed up on the economics, and everybody's doing this because they're being sympathetic and humanitarian and this sort of thing. And if you happen to think that you don't have to join some of this welfare business, then they call you selfish and mean. Like, how did they ever get away with these last 2.5 years or so with COVID, that if you didn't follow all the dictates of the dictators and tell us what to do, for some reason we were unpatriotic and we were traitors and terrorists and all these things, and they got away with that. And once again, it's sorting out the truth. And I think our enemy has to be recognized too, because the first thing is the real enemies don't believe in truth. I actually believe the cultural Marxist accepts the principle that truth is unknowable. You can't have a set of standards and decide this is true or not true. And we've heard this throughout history. People say, you can't know truth. Truth is unknowable. And therefore, somebody still has to fill the void, and that's the people who want power. And then they'll dictate all the rules. So I believe in, and I think most people do, have a concept of a higher law. And I think in a way we appeal to that. And that is the thing that our Secretary of State and CIA agent didn't believe in. Oh, we take training classes on how to lie and cheat and steal. And that's our training. And yet a nihilist, they really believe it. They have no guilt feeling. They're just accept this as being the right thing to do, and that is a hard thing to contend with, because they go by thinking they're on the right side. But if you take the individuals that we have in Washington, you'd think they would have shame. They deserve shame, but they don't show it. George Bush was being interviewed the other day by a comic. He was a president for a while. No, sorry. He was in the Cheney administration. Somebody came up, and you know how there's some pretty good comics that can go in and have an interview. But this individual he said he was Zelensky, and he was interviewing George Bush, and Bush was going along with it. And this guy led him on. He says, the United States didn't always follow the rules and the things they promised, because they had promised that they wouldn't go eastward, they wouldn't pester Russia borders, and they weren't going to push Ukraine to get them into NATO. And Bush's answer was, yeah, you're right on that, but things change. Times change, and it's very necessary. And besides, there's a principle that is not well understood and known, that we can take any treaty and leave it on purpose because we don't like it anymore. But that's a principle. Bush was saying that was ingrained, but that explains they just, and then see when we make the argument that the history of Ukraine is very important. When the Berlin Wall came down, we made concessions, and the revolution, the revolution we ran, the coup in 2014, and it was all this promising, and so if you say, oh, I disagree with that. I know Russia's no angels, but this is a war between NATO and Russia. That's what's going on. So what should we do with NATO? Maybe you would agree with Robert Taft. He said, don't ever get in it. It's bad news. If we just got out again. We don't need to be in that. And the money's a big thing, but the killing is the real evil. That is it. That is the thing that's so bad. And it's really heartbreaking when you see the ads that plays on the tragedies. You take care of people. I remember during one of our debates, they were talking about whether we'd put more money. I guess we were still in Iraq or Afghanistan. We should have more money because we've invested a lot, and a lot of people lost their lives. And I said, you just keep spending more money to save face? That's criminal. You know, just to pump it in and do the same thing over and over again, because they can't, they're incapable of making a mistake because they're incapable of understanding what is right and wrong. And they know that. They want dictatorial power. So I think there is a system that can compete with that. And that, to me, is the system that honors, presents, and understands what true liberty is all about. How do you figure out who's telling the truth? And there was a campaign or a debate event during 12 or 8, one of the debates. And I walked off, and some young people came up to me. There was like 3 or 4 together, and they wanted to talk about my statement about the Constitution. They wanted to engage me about, following the Constitution. And they were expressing their liking it. They were very pleased with what I said about the Constitution. And I said to them, do you know that 2 other candidates, after I said that, they said, that's what we believe too, and they were saying they were strict constitutionals also, and so I asked him, I said, why didn't you talk to them? They said they weren't telling the truth. But I think there's a human instinct that most people know when they recognize people lying. And that's why people can't stand watching television, because all they're listening to are a bunch of lies. But there is some sorting out that has to be done. And of course, I should memorize quotes, but I'm going to read them because I don't want to miss one word. And this is so famous, I should. Everybody will know what the quote is. And that has to do with Shakespeare when Polonius was talking to Laertes, sending him off to college. And these are the famous lines. This above all to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man. I think that's fantastic. Ancient, but it's true. It's a true statement, and people understand that, and so clearly. So I believe that we have the advantage. I really do believe that statement by the young people said they could distinguish what I was saying from somebody else because the other one seemed to be fibbing a little bit. I think that is true. I think it was mentioned by one of the speakers about, getting the information out. As a matter of fact, it might have been Daniel that said, it's the distribution of information that makes all the difference. And there's a lot of power. How are they able to achieve? I try to understand this stuff. I fight it and read about it. I lived with those people up there. I knew what it was, but they would keep doing the same thing over and over again, and the people would keep saying, well, yeah, I guess so, we'll do that, but they believe that truth doesn't matter and that they can lie. And I think they're nihilistic at all, and they say it's not like it's a clumsy thing to do, but it's sort of a philosophic ingrained event, and they paint themselves as very well trained, educated professors who decided that you can't know the truth. And it just happens that history is sort of on our side of that their truth is knowable. Really the danger is that they don't and can't they don't show shame at all. And when I think of some of our former presidents or what's going on right now and the suffering that goes on by their stupidity, you know, why wouldn't they feel badly? I think there's a mixture of understanding what truth is for this post-traumatic stress syndrome, because I think that it isn't fully explained, because there's a lot of bad things that go on in war, and a lot of bad things they had to do, and a lot of evil things that they had to watch, and then they come back, thank you for your service, you've been great, you're a brave person, and that I don't think is very good, especially if somebody's struggling with knowing the truth, because the truth is. There's so many things like that that's going on today, but I do want to spend at least a couple more minutes on the Federal Reserve. That convinces me the revolution is alive and well. You understand the issue just as well as that 14-year-old teenager that came to see me. So this is great. You know, when I did join the Libertarian Party, and that was in 1987, because that was when I was the nominee. That's something like 30-some years ago. But I was, just out of curiosity, everybody looks so young, that I wonder if there's anybody in this audience was aware of or actually got engaged or did anything in 1988. You know, the one thing is I did go to the college campuses. There was a big difference going to the college campuses back then, because you know, it wasn't like, oh, next year I'm going to be the president type thing. But I would go to the college campuses because my goals were slightly different, and I would go, and somebody said, oh yeah, we have a Libertarian club here, you can come. And sometimes we got 15 people out in one meeting. But they were good people, and a lot of them are still working with me now, you know. And you can't stop, and Dave was so good on this, you can't stop ideas. Ideas spread, and they can't be stopped. It's just that we want to make sure the bad ideas get stopped. But they do spread, ideas do spread, and the neat thing about it is I like to think and think about the remnant. The remnant is mentioned in religious views and also in the issue of liberty. There's always somebody there that's going to put together. And I noticed this, several years ago. It was in a token way, this whole thing, because people saw what was coming with the social media. You mean you think they'll can us and kick us off the air? Yeah, they might do that. So I said, I've always had faith and confidence that technology would help. Libertarians were good at technology. I wasn't. But I said the answer can't be the government coming down hard and try to sort that out. But the technology is going to be available where we can skirt it. And I think that is beginning, and I think that is good news. The remnant maintains belief and confidence and a description of what their beliefs are. And I think the number of people out there, just because there's more than 15 people here tonight, and every one of you, I mean, just think of the speakers that you have, how many people they reach. You know, I probably don't even reach half the number of people Dave reached with his famous shows. It's fantastic what happens. But I have teenagers or college kids that now, in spite of all the terrible things and the restraints on our speech. There are a lot of people start their own podcasts, and you never know how many they reach. And I try to do as many as I can, but I know there's a lot, and a lot of them are good. And so you can't count them. In the Bible it said you can't count the people in the remnant. You should say, well, there's not enough of us. But there's a couple things. There's a lot more than we know about. And the other thing, numbers aren't the most important thing. You know, the numbers are important on leadership. And I would put this room filled with leaderships for the ideology of liberty, because that's important. Because the total number, you don't wait until there's 51% and have pure democracy say, oh, 51%, we're going to change the Congress, we're going to start voting to quit the spending and all this. It's not going to work. You have to have the leadership. And I'll tell you what, if you want to learn something, I'll bet we have lessons to learn from the cultural Marxists. They were the most tyrannical infiltrators in everything. And it's really scary, but because they are way off base, everything they're doing and will do will fail. People are... But we have to be available, you know, to point these things out, and that's why sorting out the truth is very important. And I think that's really our job, to deliver the truth and get to the point where you know, I'm not saying this to talk about myself, but there was a point where people would reach and say, you get me, because they didn't really endorse what I want, but they wanted me to take a side and be on their side. And sometimes it was a strange coalition. It might be a liberal issue, it might be a draft issue, something like that. But they want to do it because they want somebody, and they want you to be credible and you understand it, and it has to be done in a manner that, you know, like Leonard Reed tried to teach, it isn't a rough sell. It isn't grabbing somebody on his shirts and all. It has to be a lot different. And somebody said, "Well, how did you put up with all this stuff? You were up there a long time. You never passed anything except the Gold Commission." So, you know, they said you were up there for a long time and nothing happened. So why is it that nothing happens? And I said, well, how did I manage it all? And I said, well, it wasn't difficult. I said, you know, I introduced a lot of bills. I talked a lot about liberty. I really felt dedicated on two things when I went. I wanted to work for sound money and stop all this stupid wars. A minor little thing to do. I said, and they said, well, you didn't do all that stuff. And I said, yeah, but I still didn't, it still didn't make me disgusted. I wasn't downhearted because of that. They said, why not? I said, I just had low expectations. I didn't think, matter of fact, the opposite occurred, because believe me, if you can think about me practicing medicine in 1974, it was 71 when Nixon gave his speech that we were going off permanently and totally off the gold standard. I read into this big significance, and that was a big event, and I've been interested in that. I got into a campaign. It was in 1974, the first campaign I got in, but that was a Watergate year. And Texas was about 90% Democrat, and somebody got wind that Ron might run for Congress. And if you find somebody to run, nobody else would do it. But it just turned out that it was different. But my goal was to talk about these issues, the issues that you're talking about right now, and you're talking about how to spread these issues. But the spreading of the issues will become much easier if you follow the rules of straightforward honesty about it. And Another bit of advice that I got is know your subject. Know your subject. I felt like I wanted to talk about monetary policy, so ever since the 60s, I've read endlessly on trying to understand. It's hard to understand a secret organization. They hide everything. So it's a big job, but there's room for optimism for it, because I think what's going to happen is we're in the middle of it now. The major crash, the crunch is coming. The Fed can't bail us out now, and people are suffering right now. There's a bit of information that is very, very typical of recessions and problems. Prices are going up. Prices are going up, and the people rightfully say, well, I don't have enough money to pay for this. I want the government to do something. And yes, that's true, but they should be more accurately saying, my money isn't worth much anymore. It's lost its value. And the real reason you're having trouble is deficit financing, because nobody's against deficits. I mean, it is unbelievable, how willing they are to spend. Even this week, Biden came up with a proposal for next year's military budget, and the Congress is wanting to raise it already, and they haven't even debated it. They just raise it up, and they're getting away with it because there's enough people who still believe it. But they're going to lose confidence, and that's when we may see what Mises called the crack-up boom. That means when people want to get out of money, all money, and then they buy anything. But they don't buy paper, they buy stuff. And that's liable to come. But people ask me about investments at the time, and I try to avoid doing too much of that. But I like to think that the investment thing it's not so much an investment, but it's protection. I want as many people to be protected. See, we're all going to be better off if we're in a group trying to survive. If a group like this understands it's actually what you're doing, it's going to be so much easier. So that's why, to me, education is so very important, that people understand, and they understand economics, but they're not going to get that information from government schools. Also, people think, well, the freedom stuff, that's old-fashioned stuff. Well, tyranny is old-fashioned, probably older than freedom. They've both been around a long time, and they both, freedom and slavery, tyranny have always competed. But modern-day freedom, the development from the Industrial Revolutions, last 200 years, essentially in the American Revolution, even though it's in trouble. Just think of all the things that have happened in the last 200 years. And I keep thinking, my dad was born in 1904, and he would tell me stories that we lived on a little place that was their farm at the time, and they got into the milk business. They did retail milk delivery by horse and buggy. And that's in my lifetime, him telling me these stories are a real thing. But just think of where we are now. Technology is so magnificent. And the real tragedy there is how much of the technology and the ability to take that money out of the pockets of people and make it be spent. And the technology is fine and dandy, even though the government shouldn't be doing it. And what they do is they spend all this technology. How much of the technology is being used for missiles and drones and submarines and nuclear bombs and all of this? And so much of it is used for killing, and so little is being used, to promote the cause of liberty. That is our job, our responsibility. It's necessary now as much as ever before. The message is there, it's loud and clear, and it just needs an army of people to spread the message. Just think, if a room like this is dedicated, could each fund 100 people that would say, you've converted me to becoming a libertarian. I mean, that is a revolution. This is revolutionary. with a very complicated statement. Not only is freedom new, but freedom is popular. Thank you very much.
Greatest hero. He's our greatest hero. He's the Libertarian Party's greatest hero, Dr. Paul. All right, thank you again so much, everyone, for all of your efforts this year and coming here to this convention. It's not over yet. We need every single one of your votes tomorrow. Set your alarms, plug your phones into your extra batteries, make sure. And we'll see you. Michael Heiss has a couple of parting words for us here. Thank you again, everybody. Good night.